Sulla had seen something in the boy that his allies had not. His closest friends had petitioned for the teenager. He had pardoned him. Then he had added something. He told them they lacked foresight. He said that in this boy, there were many Mariuses. The men who had just saved Caesar's life did not understand what Sulla meant. They took it as the irritable exaggeration of a dictator who had been argued out of an execution. They took their young client home and congratulated themselves. Sulla retired to his villa. He died without ever learning how the story ended. He was the only one who had read it correctly. Even in an era defined by brutal warlords, some individuals possess a spirit that completely defies the very concept of submission. Refusing the absolute dictator of Rome, a young patrician accepted a life of exile and sickness rather than surrender his honor. Yet, his defiance landed him straight into the hands of Mediterranean pirates, transforming the proud nobleman into a helpless hostage. Instead of begging, he mentally enslaved his captors, ruling their pirate vessel with an iron will before securing his own release. Returning with an unauthorized fleet, he swept down upon his former tormentors, transforming a humiliating captivity into a legend of absolute dominance. Did this extraordinary triumph over fear mark the genesis of Rome's greatest hero, or the blueprint for its most dangerous dictator? It is a story that starts when Rome itself was held captive by another tyrant. The Genesis of Defiance. It is the year 82 BC. Rome is not a city of marble and enlightened debate. It is a sprawling theater of blood, proscriptions, and raw, unrestrained violence. The civil conflict has concluded. The aristocratic party holds the apparatus of government. The popular party has been broken. Executions define the political process. The heads of senators appeared on the rostra in the forum. Lists appeared on whitened boards nailed to the temple columns. There were 520 names of senators and knights, men with clients and debts and houses in good neighborhoods. Any citizen who killed a name on the list received 2 talents of silver. Proscription lists determined the lifespan of the citizenry. The Colline Gate had decided everything 6 weeks before. The Marian forces broke there, outside Rome's walls, in the autumn dark. The screams of the Samnite prisoners being slaughtered next to the Senate House were the music that accompanied the Republic's surrender. Sulla spoke to the senators while those screams were still audible through the walls. He wanted them to understand the new order of things. Several senators turned pale. None of them walked out. The man who holds the city by the throat is Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Following a brutal and exhausting civil war, Sulla has marched his own legions across the sacred boundary of Rome, an act of supreme political sacrilege, and seized absolute control. He has revived an ancient and terrifying office, the dictator. But he has altered its nature. He is not merely a temporary savior appointed for a 6-month emergency. He is the dictator legibus faciendis et republicae constituendae, the dictator for making laws and settling the Constitution. There is no time limit to his power. The dictator possesses the power to alter the Constitution, confiscate property, and mandate the domestic arrangements of patrician families. True power in this era manifests as brute violence, administered without hesitation or institutional restraint. His word is not merely law. It is an executioner's blade that falls without warning. His silence is death. The crucible of the young patrician. Gaius Julius Caesar resides within this jurisdiction. He is barely a man, yet he is entangled in the highest levels of the ousted regime. He had lost his father at the age of 15. The young man is now in his 18th year. The state had previously nominated him to the priesthood of Jupiter. The position carries strict religious parameters and locates him deep within the ancient administrative machinery of Rome. An engagement had previously bound him to a woman named Casutia. She possessed considerable wealth, but her lineage belonged only to the equestrian order. Caesar severed this engagement. Instead, he entered into a marriage with Cornelia. Cornelia is the daughter of Sulla's most bitter political enemy, Cinna. Cinna had ruled Rome in Sulla's absence. He had held the office of consul 4 times. The marriage aligns the teenage Caesar directly with the defeated popular party. Her presence in his life is an intolerable defiance to the dictator. In this era, senators and equestrians are being slaughtered daily, and their severed heads routinely adorn the rostra in the infamous proscriptions. The warlords expect nothing less than immediate, trembling compliance. Sulla issues a singular, uncompromising decree. He orders the young man to repudiate his wife. The directive is not a negotiation. It is an application of supreme state power. The implicit threat is clear to every citizen of Rome. Obey, or have your name added to the lists of the proscribed, whose severed heads routinely adorn the rostra in the forum. Caesar receives the order. He refuses to divorce Cornelia. He does not negotiate. He does not plead. The teenager denies the dictator. A youth with no military force flatly defies the absolute master of Rome, the commander of the Roman legions. The retaliation is swift, bureaucratic, and devastating. Sulla applies the mechanisms of the state, seeking to crush the boy by stripping away his aristocratic identity. He confiscates the dowry of Cornelia. He seizes the entirety of Caesar's sprawling patrimonial estates. The financial obliteration is immediate. Furthermore, Sulla strips the young man of his prestigious sacerdotal office, the Flamen Dialis, the high priest of Jupiter, tearing away the sacred honors that accompanied it. This office was an ancient, highly restricted role, bound by archaic taboos. As the Flamen Dialis, Caesar was forbidden from touching iron, riding a horse, or even spending a single night outside the city limits of Rome. By stripping him of this sacred restraint, Sulla inadvertently unchains the very man who will one day dismantle the Republic. It is Sulla who makes it possible for Caesar to ride across the Rubicon with a sword in hand. Suddenly, the young, proud patrician is no longer a golden child of Rome. The dictator categorizes him officially as a member of the opposition. The penalty for this categorization is destruction. He is a hunted, wanted fugitive in his own homeland. Caesar departs from Rome. Stripped of his wealth and his bodyguards, he loses his residence and is forced to flee northward, deep into the rugged Sabine country. He became a fugitive within the territory his family had governed. The territory offers a temporary geographical shield, but Sulla's secret police operate across this landscape. Inquisitors move through the districts. They hold mandates to locate and detain political targets. During this period, he contracts the quartan ague, a vicious, severe, and debilitating strain of malaria. It racks his body with cyclical fevers and chills. The fever alters his physical temperature and weakens his mobility. He requires rest. Yet, the pursuit permits no stasis. To evade Sulla's relentless death squads, the young fugitive must relocate his physical coordinates almost every single night. He moves in the dark, sleeping in the damp wilderness, constantly listening for the footfalls of assassins. He navigates the Sabine terrain while violently compromised by disease. The Inquisitors track his movements. The ultimate test of this period occurs when Caesar, burning with fever, is finally cornered by a commander of the secret police named Cornelius Vagates. Cornelius waylays the fugitive night after night and locates the 18-year-old. In this moment of absolute vulnerability, with a blade practically at his throat, the power of life and death rests with the Inquisitor. Caesar does not weep. He does not beg for his life. He engages the operative. He presents a financial bribe of 2 talents. The exact sum the state offered for his severed head was paid to keep it attached to his neck. Cornelius accepts the silver. He permits the fugitive to depart. He sailed to Bithynia, to the court of King Nicomedes, and remained there briefly. Meanwhile, political negotiations continue in the capital. The most devoted members of the aristocratic party intervene. The Vestal virgins approach the dictator. Mamercus Aemilius submits a plea. Aurelius Cotta presents arguments. They plead the cause of the hunted fugitive. They refuse to let the matter drop. This persistence challenges the dictator's initial decree. Sulla evaluates the political cost of executing the teenager against the demands of his own allies. He reaches a decision. He delivers his verdict to the delegation. He speaks the words, "Very well then, you win. Take him." The pardon is issued. But Sulla appends a chilling observation to the official clemency. He states that his allies lack foresight. He declares that in this boy, there are many Mariuses. Caesar emerges from the Sabine country. He retains his life. He had received Sulla's clementia. Even so, he still refused to divorce Cornelia. He did not remain in Rome to integrate with the Sullan aristocracy. Instead, he departed for Asia Minor. In 78 BC, the moment Sulla died, Caesar immediately returned to Rome. The dictator's clementia had spared his physical body, but he never gave his submission. Decades later, when Caesar offered this exact same clementia to his own defeated enemies, they would not either. Now, he requires a public function. He initiates a legal prosecution, bringing a charge of extortion against Cornelius Dolabella, an ex-consul who had previously received a triumph. The court convenes, but the prosecution fails to secure a sentence. The political atmosphere in Rome becomes increasingly hostile. Caesar decides to depart from the center of power. He selects Rhodes as his destination, intending to study rhetoric under the renowned instructor Apollonius Molo. The discipline requires intense intellectual focus. The weight of silver. It is the bitter winter of circa 75 BC. Caesar boards a vessel to navigate toward Rhodes. But the Mediterranean Sea, in the 70s BC, is not the orderly, policed lake of the later Roman Empire. It operates under its own jurisdiction. Decades of the Marian-Sullan civil wars have drained the Republic of its resources and diverted its legions. The Roman navy does not secure the waters. The maritime routes have been abandoned by the state, leaving a sprawling power vacuum. With the destruction of Carthage, the decline of the Seleucid Empire, and the waning of Ptolemaic Egypt, there was no significant naval power left in the Mediterranean. Into this void stepped the Cilician pirates. These are not mere scavengers or petty thieves. They are highly organized maritime syndicates, the undisputed lords of the Mediterranean. They command absolute maritime terror and overwhelming physical superiority. They utilize large fleets and innumerable small craft to dictate the terms of transit. They took Roman citizens, magistrates, merchants, passengers, and sold them at delos by the thousands, or held the rich ones for ransom. Near the desolate, rocky outcrop of Pharmacusa, modern Pharmakonisi, in the Dodecanese, the pirates intercept the transport. The capture is absolute. Heavily armed men board the ship and detain the passengers. The physical geography of Pharmacusa is bleak. Today, geological surveys confirm its harsh, unyielding terrain as an isolated rock. It is a strategic ambush point positioned perfectly along the ancient maritime routes between the Aegean and the Asian mainland. There, captives could be held far from the reach of the law. The warlords of the sea surround the Patrician. They assess their captive, recognizing they have captured a Roman of noble bearing. They calculate his ransom and present their terms. They demand 20 talents of silver. It was a standard figure for a man of Caesar's apparent rank, neither insultingly low nor aspirationally high. What follows is an act of psychological theater, so profound that it has echoed through 2 millennia. Caesar does not tremble. He does not negotiate the sum downward. He bursts into laughter. Standing on the deck of their ship, a captive surrounded by cutthroats, he openly mocks his captors. He informs them that they clearly do not know who they have captured. 20 talents, he insists, is an insult to his dignity. He rejects the sum and volunteers, demands that they raise his own ransom to 50 talents. 50 talents was not a mere sum of currency. It equated to 12,000 gold pieces. It was a physical reality of approximately 1,300 kilograms of silver. A Roman legionary earned 225 denarii for a year's service, a life spent marching in the mud and bleeding for the state. 50 talents equated to 300,000 denarii. It was the financial backing of an entire municipality. It was a king's ransom, a fortune designed to break the treasury of a noble family. The pirates, according to Plutarch, were delighted. They took this for boyish bravado, the performative swagger of a young aristocrat trying to save face. They took the 50 talents as their windfall and settled in to wait. Caesar then reorganizes his environment. He dismisses his staff. He orders his attendants to leave the ship. He instructs them to travel to certain cities where he is known, primarily the distant, wealthy coastal city of Miletus, to borrow the massive funds. The messengers depart. Consciously choosing to remain in captivity, Caesar is left on the pirate vessel. He keeps only a skeletal retinue. Historical accounts from antiquity diverge slightly on the exact makeup of his remaining staff. Suetonius, writing from the imperial archives more than a century later, records a captivity of nearly 40 days, and notes Caesar kept a physician and 2 valets. Meanwhile, the Greek philosopher Plutarch, composing his moral biographies in the early 2nd century AD, claims he kept 1 friend and 2 attendants for 38 days. Yet, the core narrative remains unanimously agreed upon. For over a month, a staggering psychological inversion occurs on the shores of Pharmacusa. The hostage becomes the master. The captive dictates the absolute terms of his own imprisonment. Caesar assumes command of the vessel's interior life. He is held by men who execute captives for minimal infractions, yet he roams freely among them. When he wished to sleep, he sent orders demanding the pirates remain entirely quiet, silencing their rowdy camp with sheer aristocratic willpower. The days accumulate. Caesar requires occupation. He does not ask for provisions. He joins the pirates in their sports, participating in their physical exercises on the deck. He observes their habits. He utilizes his intellectual training. He drafts orations and writes poems. The captive assembles the hardened criminals and stands before them. He forces them to listen to the speeches and poetry he composes during his idle hours. They express no admiration for the rhetoric. They do not validate the compositions. Caesar evaluates his audience and delivers his judgment. He openly berates them, calling them dunces. He shouts into their faces that they are illiterate, uncultured barbarians who lack the capacity to comprehend the text. The armed men absorb the insults. The dynamic escalates. Caesar routinely and casually addresses their future. He states that once he is free, he will return and personally crucify every single one of them. He delivers this promise repeatedly. He presents the threat as a jest. The teenager smiles. The warlords of the sea, accustomed to weeping, cowering victims, treat these threats as the highly eccentric, entertaining humor of a harmless, aristocratic youth. They laugh. They possess the weapons. He possesses nothing. They fundamentally fail to recognize the cold, unyielding reality taking shape before them. Caesar is not making a joke. The young patrician operates from a foundation of unyielding, unshakable fearlessness. The trauma of the sullen proscriptions had excised the capacity for submission. He had refused the dictator of Rome. He does not recognize the authority of maritime thieves. He proves that even stripped of legal authority and physical freedom, his intellect and will are sovereign. He waits. On the 38th day, the messengers return. They bring the required sum. 50 talents arrive at the island. The transaction commences. The money is paid down. The physical weight of the ransom, 1,300 kilograms of silver, is transferred to the captors. The pirates count the currency. The agreement is fulfilled. The captors release the prisoner. Caesar steps onto the coast. The pirates remain on the water. The captivity has ended. The shadow of the cross. A normal man would have fled to Rome, thanking the gods for his survival. Caesar is not a normal man. He does not proceed to Rhodes. The academic study of rhetoric is suspended. He travels at breakneck speed to Miletus. Miletus situated on the Anatolian coast, is a city of immense Hellenistic wealth and maritime infrastructure. The extensive port structures, whose foundations remain visible in archaeological surveys today, provide Caesar with exactly what he needs: ships, men, and speed. He possesses no official military command. He holds no imperium, the legal, sacred military command bestowed by the Senate. Relying solely on his own imperative, operating entirely as a private citizen, he raises a fleet. Through sheer force of will and personal authority, he requisitions vessels and mounts the ships with heavily armed personnel. He then orders the privately assembled fleet to put to sea. The winter conditions remain. He navigates straight back into the waters of Pharmacusa. He seeks the specific individuals who had detained him. He locates the pirate fleet. They are anchored, secure in their stronghold, completely off guard. He falls upon them with the sudden, inevitable violence of a natural disaster. Caesar initiates the assault. The element of surprise is total. He drives his ships into their formation. The engagement is brief. He physically detains the very men who had just released him, seizing their vessels. He systematically reclaims every single coin of his 50 talents of silver, along with the rest of their ill-gotten plunder. He secures the bodies of the men who had held him. The transition from helpless fugitive to absolute commander occurs without legal authorization. Caesar transports his bewildered captives to the mainland, depositing them into a dark prison structure in the city of Pergamum. But here, the narrative encounters a sudden, bureaucratic wall. Under Roman law, as a private citizen in 75 BC, Caesar has absolutely no authority to execute provincial prisoners. That power rests solely with the provincial governor of Bithynia and Pergamum, the praetor Marcus Junius Juncus. Caesar travels to meet with Junius and demands the immediate execution orders for the pirates. Junius Juncus, however, is a bureaucrat. He looks at the captured pirates and the immense pirate plunder, and he sees not a matter of justice, but a matter of state revenue. Swayed by avarice and calculating how he might line his own pockets, the governor defers Caesar's request. He states his intention to auction the captives into slavery to enrich the provincial coffers. He notes he will process the prisoners and look into the matter at a later, unspecified date. For Julius Caesar, the bureaucratic hesitation and avarice of a Roman official are just as irrelevant as the physical threats of Sulla's death squads or the pirates' blades. He perceives a fundamental weakness in the provincial administrative system. If the state will not act, Caesar will become the state. Bypassing the established legal apparatus entirely, Caesar does not wait for the law. He immediately rides back to the prison in Pergamum. He applies unyielding physical force to fulfill the casual promise he had made on the beaches of Pharmacusa. He organizes the execution on his own, entirely illegal, authority. He orders the timber to be brought forward. The structures are assembled. The crosses are erected on the earth. The cross, the crux, is a mechanism of capital punishment specifically designated for slaves, pirates, and enemies of the state who lacked Roman citizenship. It is designed not merely to end biological life, but to inflict maximum public degradation and prolonged, agonizing suffering. The pirates are processed. The physical reality of the punishment materializes. Caesar approaches the operation with unyielding precision. He evaluates the parameters of the execution and issues a final directive. The order modifies the standard Roman procedure in a detail that perfectly encapsulates the chillingly pragmatic nature of his absolute vengeance. Suetonius records a rare, macabre moment of what the historian calls mercy. Caesar commands his executioners to secure the prisoners, but he orders that their throats be cut first, before they are affixed to the wood. This is not born of compassion, but of cold efficiency, sparing them prolonged agony of asphyxiation, while simultaneously ensuring his absolute vengeance is swiftly, permanently, and spectacularly achieved. The executioners unsheath their blades. They approach the bound men. The iron severs the flesh. The blood exits the arteries. The laughter that had echoed on the ship ceases. The executioners lift the corpses. They affix the dead weight to the wooden beams. They drive the nails. The crucifixion is completed. The bodies of the pirates who had controlled the sea hung along the coast of Asia Minor, a grim testament to the will of a 25-year-old patrician. Caesar observes the crosses. Sulla, who had stepped down from the dictatorship in 79 BC to spend the rest of his life in the countryside, had been dead for 3 years by the time Caesar crucified the pirates. The dictator who had called this boy dangerous had retired to his villa in Campania and dictated his memoirs. He died of an internal hemorrhage brought on by a shouting fit in 78 BC, without ever knowing how the story would end. What Sulla read in Caesar and found alarming was not the boy's connections, or his name, or his future potential. It was the specific blankness where submission should have been. The space where a normal person, confronted with Sulla's power, would feel the weight of that power rearranging their priorities. That space, in Caesar, appeared to be empty. The pirates misread this as youth. Junius misread it as overreach. Sulla was the only one who identified it correctly, and he named it not as a virtue, but as a threat. Many Mariuses. Both Sulla and Caesar were dictators, but their ways of handling enemies were entirely different. Sulla's proscriptions killed even those who would submit, while Caesar's clementia spared even those who would betray him. For Caesar, who lacked Sulla's absolute power, clementia was an inevitability. Caesar departs the execution site. He boards his vessel and resumes his journey toward Rhodes, where the instruction of Apollonius Molo awaits him. This is the very path to education, where he would later study rhetoric under Apollonius, who also taught Cicero, attaining a mastery that everyone who heard him would agree made him Rome's second greatest orator, behind only Cicero. But information reaches his ship during the transit. The geopolitical situation has destabilized. The foreign king Mithridates has initiated hostilities. His forces are ravaging the nearby regions of Asia Minor, and the allies of the Roman people are in danger. Caesar evaluates the intelligence. He does not wait for the Senate. He does not request authorization from the capital. He crosses over into the province of Asia, arrives on the mainland, and raises a force of irregulars. He mobilizes the local population and marches against the military apparatus of the foreign king. He then engages the enemy and drives the deputy of Mithridates from the province, confirming the allegiance of the timorous cities. The genesis of the commander is complete. The events of 82 to 75 BC forged the architect of the Roman Empire. By raising a private fleet, by reclaiming his own ransom, and by executing prisoners without the legal imperium of Rome, Caesar crossed a psychological Rubicon long before he ever brought his legions to the physical river in Italy. The sea washed the shore at Pharmacusa the same way it had the day before. The rocks did not record what had happened on them. The wood of the crosses dried in the Aegean wind. The 50 talents were already gone, counted, dispersed, moving through Miletus in smaller denominations toward other purposes. Caesar walked back to his ship. The crosses stood behind him on the coast. He did not look back.